Welcome to another trip down the Bourbon Road with your hosts, Jim and Mike. So grab a glass of your favorite bourbon and kick back.
Hey, this is Big Chief, and you're listening to the Bourbon Road. You know what I love to pour in my old fashions is a little maple syrup. Can't be just any maple syrup. It has to be from Seldom Seen Farms up in Ohio. He takes bourbon barrels, pours his syrup in there, and ages it for 6 to 9 months, making for some delicious syrup that you could pour on pancakes. You could pour it on waffles, chicken and waffles like this fat guy likes. But seriously, you want to make a delicious cocktail with some maple syrup and not that old simple syrup? Check out seldomseenmaple.com. Pick up some stuff from there today. We'd appreciate it. Hey everybody, this is Big Chief, and you're listening to the Bourbon Road. And you know what I did today is got my pickup. We drove south from Shelbyville, driving through wheat fields. You know, the Weedy King of Kentucky just loves that. I almost stopped and got a photo in the middle of a wheat field today. Saved 2 turtles, because that's what I do. You know, old country boy. You're driving 65 miles an hour down an interstate, trying to weave through the buzzards, and I see 2 turtles, and I had to save them. But about an hour south of Shelbyville, we ended up at one of my favorite distilleries of all time. It feels like home, Maker's Mark. And we got 2 special guests today, 2 true bourbon bullshitters. I've found out, I'm sitting in here with them for a minute, and I'm going to love it. And this is going to be a great conversation. But I got the master distiller, Denny Potter, with me. And I don't know, Denny, is she just the master bullshitter, Jane Bowie, with me?
Obviously she's our master blender.
We can name her that.
But I think her official title is head of innovation and blending, which, it's an interesting thing because, I've been in the industry, this is my 25th year. And, back when I got in the industry, like somebody with, Jane's talent and ability was kind of frowned upon. Like the term blending was never something that you would actually use in our industry because it, blending was associated with violating the rules of bourbon, right?
So somebody's just pouring, they were just back in the day, they just pouring barrels together and it's like, oh, that's good right there. Put some water to it and let's proof it down and go to town.
Blending was associated with, they're adding caramel to it or they're adding some kind of colorant that, if it's
trying to mask inferior whiskey or neutral grain spirit.
But the reality is, the term, the title master blender has been around a hell of a lot longer than master distiller when you look at the Scotch industry. And I think one of the things that's been extremely interesting, and I give Jane all the credit, is making people realize that blending is a big part of what we do, right? Like, so it was a term that was a bit taboo, but we did it. The blending of the barrels, right? Like none of us bottle our core product single barrel. Like there's actually, you can say mingling.
Everyone says mingling.
Yeah, it can be mingling.
Marrying.
It can be blending.
They use any word but blending.
But I think what's been extremely interesting is, obviously Jane created our private select program and the evolution of that into the wood finishing and, where you're marrying barrels together that have different taste profiles in order to create a final product, which, is blending. So one of the things that I've truly enjoyed seeing evolve is the reality that blending is a big part of what we do. And it's not taboo. It's actually, that has been around a hell of a lot longer than the title master distiller. So I think one of the things that, that Jane and I complement each other very well because, I'm on the distilling side, right? So it's all about the grain. It's all about the process. It's all about the distillate. It's all about making it ready to go in the barrel. And then Jane has absolutely made a name for herself on the maturation side and then the blending of those barrels. So pretty much every day we almost come to blows.
Every day.
We're both extremely stubborn.
In case you're wondering, I usually win.
She doesn't. I'm not joking. I would never punch a woman, but if I did, Jane would be the first. But
I would destroy you.
You wouldn't. You wouldn't.
I would destroy.
You think that?
Would you throw whiskey in his eyes?
I'm from Monticello, Kentucky.
Whatever. This has nothing to do with switchblades and whatever else you guys did down there. I know I would step into it. Like I would step into
I
it.
would kick your shin and glass your neck.
Let's back up because you said you're from Monticello,
I
which
am.
for people that don't know, that's down by Lake Cumberland.
Lake Cumberland,
right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
they got a goat.
God's country.
They got a goat down there on the lake. Do you know about the goat?
I don't know where on the lake, because I grew up near Conley Bottom, but now we boat out of Grider Hill because my family's from Albany.
Supposedly it's a thing down there. People try to take a picture of that big old giant billy goat. You know, he's just down there.
Well, that explains a lot, I think.
Yep. They just let their goats
The most
loose down there.
popular thing about Monticello
It's like-
is a goat that you don't even know about.
No, and I'm not going to, this is a clean show and I'll use my language for you later. But if you're going to Monticello, you want to go have a cheeseburger at the city pool hall. It's the best cheeseburger of your life. It's wonderful.
Our listeners need to know that because maybe they want to go down to Lake Cumberland and visit. So,
it is God's country. It's beautiful.
little cheeseburger in paradise down there.
Hell yeah.
So you got some whiskey in front of her. I know our listeners are like, God dang, is this guy going to talk about whiskey? Well, there's only one kind of whiskey here. It's weeded bourbon, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you make. But this is a pretty special bottle to me. It was the FAO 2, right?
Yeah. FAO too.
It's got a little fairy in the bottle. Because that's what Faye is, right?
It's we've laughed about because it stood for fatty acid esters. So we have kind of a taste goal for all these wood finishing. And so Andrew Webrink at Independent Stave Company actually names the staves based on the project we're doing. So last year's taste goal was all around fatty acid esters, but everyone was like, Aunt Faye, what's Faye?
We have to tell the story about Andrew from last week.
Oh my gosh, it's the best story. But yeah, this one was actually, speaking of our arguing and coming to blows, we ended up doing 2 whiskeys last year because we could not agree. And we decided the FAO one was more taste flavor driven, and this FAO 2 is texture driven, which Denny, this is really kind of, I think, Denny's sweet spot. If you were to say what's Denny in a glass as far as what he loves and what he looks for, I think this one, along with that 2020 release, were really kind of your wheelhouse.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that was the focus. I mean, one of the things when we were talking about fatty acid esters, I mean, it was, the debate could go on, which basically, if you're non-chill filtered, that's what chill filtration does, right? And people don't realize, and chill filtration was not anything anybody was interested in until probably the last 7, 8, 10 years, but we don't chill filter anything. And so, you know, what I enjoy about the fact that we don't chill filter is there's a texture to the liquid that I think we really captured with the FAO.
You're leaving the fat in it, yeah.
And so, you know, it coats, like it really coats your mouth, it coats your tongue. It's got kind of a velvety, buttery type feel to it.
That spice is there though.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, like when you're describing like the taste and the finish, no question. But when you're talking about the feel, like it's got a really nice.
It's a very warming spice. Like it's a very subtle spice, and what I love about the spice and makers, like you got to get savory spice out of the brain. And I always say you got to go to grandma's kitchen at Christmas time. It's all those
that
baking
clove
spices
and cinnamon.
Yeah.
Maybe a little nutmeg.
Yeah.
What was so amazing about this whiskey, I think, and I mean, it's interesting when you get in the mindset of what you're going for, it really becomes about the whiskey and less about your own preferences. Because my palate's more of an FAO 1. I like the fruit and the funk and those danky warehouse notes. But this, we argue about finish a lot because we enjoy different finishes. I love dry, kind of astringent. I don't want bitter, but I don't mind astringency. And Denny hates astringency. So we'll be tasting the same whiskey and I'll be like, oh, this finish is amazing. He's like, it's the worst. The finish on this is so clean, which is so interesting. You've got all this mouthfeel, you've got all this spice, but then the finish is quite clean. It gives you a little bit of a lingering spice, but it's not hanging around and tannic or astringent. It's quite a clean finish.
This is that atomic firebomb or that Jolly Rancher cinnamon candy to me right here. Just that finish is so long on this. It leaves with you and you're like, man, this is just a beautiful bourbon.
Yeah.
And Denny, I don't know if you know this or not, but actually for the past 2 years, Maker's Mark, we've named Maker's Mark Cask Strength was our bourbon of the year, I think 2020. And then last year, 2021's bourbon of the year for us was this bottle right here, Feo
Hell
2.
yeah.
And that's my co-host.
I made it just for you, Mike.
I felt like that. I felt you said this guy's the Weed King of Kentucky. We got to make it just for him. We felt like this had everything that both of us were looking for. Jim's a rye spice guy. And for him to agree with me and say, hey, yeah, this is the bottle right here. Me and him, we probably downed 2 bottles of it. And we were going up. You guys went up against like Russell's Reserve 13-year-old, some other great bottles out there. And we were like, this is
that Jimmy bottle. Russell, he does okay.
He knows what he's doing a little bit, right? But this right here to me had so much more texture, not too much oak in it, where that 13-year-old, some people are like, they just look at the year. That's all they're looking at. They judge stuff off a year. And I'm like, don't do that. Just drink the whiskey, open the bottle and enjoy it, and then let it speak to you. Don't look at the label. Yeah. Because the label really doesn't mean anything. I've been saying it for I don't know how many years, but if you're judging the quality of a whiskey by age or price, you're missing out. Like you are legitimately missing out on so many good things. But yeah, I mean, this is, the great thing about these wood finishing series, and I think the great thing about like Jane and I working together, is we can agree to disagree, but we also realize it's not just about us. I mean, it is about,
because if it was, I would always win, because I'm the alpha.
Again, I would step into it. You'd never, you'd probably see her, but she'd probably have a stutter or something like that. But
she get all a nervous tick going on.
But it is, the tough thing, especially for us being in the industry as long as we have, is understanding you're not creating a whiskey for yourself, right? Like, you're creating a whiskey for a lot of other people. And it's been one of the big learnings for me as I've come back to makers is, understanding the benefit of that. And it's fun. Like, because I'm somebody that naturally leans towards things that I like, and it's safe. But
vanilla.
Will you let me talk?
It's true.
Will you
true,
well,
buddy?
Let's talk about your descriptors.
No,
right? No, let's talk about Jane's
waiting.
Descriptors are
everything's a hybrid.
If an avocado and an acorn had a baby, this is what it would taste like. Well, what the hell is that?
Delicious.
Like, they can't even breed, but that's what.
But Mike, you eaten acorn before?
When I say, if I say an avocado and a pineapple have a baby, you know exactly what that tastes like.
He does. He's going to say yes.
Yes, he does.
Because
you can visualize the pineapple. No, you can visualize the creaminess of an avocado and the earthiness with that, God, and the freshness.
I cannot believe you're justifying that explanation and that descriptor right there.
I'm sorry. I have more than 3 adjectives in my vocabulary.
Let's get into Jane's blending.
Let's do.
How did you
let's
this
figure
is
her
what
out.
You came into bourbon for, is blending, right?
It's not. I got hired at 25 years old by Rob Samuels to be the first international employee for Maker's Mark. So I was our global brand ambassador, and I spent 5 years launching Makers in different countries, export markets around the world. So I was an educator. I worked in advocacy. I would go in and I would train distributors and work with bartenders in restaurants primarily.
So pretty much just drinking whiskey with
Hell
people.
Yeah. They could have not paid me. It was for a 25-year-old girl from Kentucky that just loved bourbon and everything about it. And I was the same as you. Like, Makers was what we drank at home, even though I grew up in a dry town. Once I got older, it was everybody. My grandma had Makers, and I didn't know.
So you're like 7 years old, just getting a big old glass of whiskey?
No, I thought my family were teetotalers. It was literally not till I got older in college, and they were like, "We drink too." wow.
My family was the exact opposite. So what you're describing, Mike, is exactly how I grew up.
I didn't grow up like that.
But she grew up in a holler down there like Cumberland.
Yeah, it's not.
You heard her switchblade reference. I mean, there's some truth to that.
It was brass knuckles.
Listen to Loretta Lynn and stuff like that.
It's very different than this part of Kentucky. I think it's what's so amazing about Kentucky. It's a very dynamic and diverse state when you look at the east to the west to central, and then, northern Kentucky is more like the Midwest to me. But the thing about, I always say about advocacy, the Bernie lovers of the world are few and far between. When you look at him as the face of heaven, one of the faces of Heaven Hill, and Jim Beam before as a national ambassador, like, he is amazing. I never felt like that was the path for me. And the reality is you kind of have a foot in sales and a foot in marketing. And I did a lot of different jobs, and I loved the industry. I started here that first week, actually trained. Denny taught me. He was running the distillery at the time. I learned the distilling operations from Denny when I first started.
Did you really want to fire that first week?
No,
I just couldn't figure it out. I mean, it was strange. Like, one, it was great, but we never had an international employee ever. So I was trying to figure out, okay, she's from Kentucky, but we're going to train her and then send her over to London to be really our first international employee. And she was 25, 26 years old. I couldn't wrap my brain around what that was.
You would never hire me, that version of me today. The industry's moved on too much, I think.
But what was really cool about it is obviously we worked together, here at the distillery and did a lot of things, just from a process standpoint to help Jane out. But then when she moved over, and then I got to go over and do market visits.
Oh, we had the best time
to see, exactly what that was and how she did it. It was, it's a part of the business that I could never do. Like the energy involved, the networking involved, just the handshake. All of that was completely.
It was selling a drink at a time. It was not a bourbon market. It was a Jack market, but it was not a bourbon market, and people didn't know. So you really felt like it wasn't even about makers. It was just about letting people peek into our industry. And it was a shot at a time. There was no, we're selling bottles. It was one person at a time. It was true grassroots, which was how this brand was built. And for a 25-year-old, it was the greatest job in the world. But then when you start getting older, it's, what do I do? And I think, knowing like, hey, maybe I want to have a family someday. How does that compute? What does that look like? I can't, I want to stay in this industry. I love it. And the liquid was what I loved. I love the liquid. I love whiskey, and not just makers. Denny can tell you my bar at home is vast. I just love everything about our industry. And so I wanted to be the person. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it was never about titles. And then when I learned what an actual master distiller did, it was like, oh, I can't do that. And I know master distillers are different at different distilleries, but at makers, it really is the person that understands the operations holistically. And so I just started saying, I want to be the person that decides what liquid goes in the bottle. Is that a job? And they were like, that's not a job. And I want to do innovation. And Bill's always like, what can you do? And so Private Select was kind of the opportunity to Rob was like, go see what you can do. Like, we want to explore this. And I worked with him and Bill. And so from 2014 on, innovation became the side hustle. And then finally they let me drop all the other jobs about 2.5 years ago. So,
well, you were already doing 100% innovation before that,
but I was
able to do it full time.
Yeah.
You were our innovation.
No. And it's just, here's what I'll say. I think tasting is practice. I think some people are natural God-given talents with smelling and tasting and, but I am a big believer in it's like anything. If you want to be good at something, it is practice. It is that muscle memory.
Well, the big thing about tasting, and, we were talking about this not that long ago, it's not just being a great taster. It's the ability to describe what you're tasting and for it to be accurate. Because trust me, I mean, I've seen tasting notes on things that we have released, and it's like, I have no idea where that's coming from. But it's that ability to describe what you're tasting and for it to be accurate. That's a tough one. And it's a tough one even in-house, with our own taste panel or with Jane and I and Beth when we're working on wood finishing, just to be calibrated to terminology and describing what we're tasting. That's the talent. She's really, really, really good at that. I do have like 3 or 4 adjectives. But pretty much when I say them, everybody knows what I'm talking about.
I give you shit, but you're actually a really, really good taster. It's annoying.
I'm so glad that was recorded.
Let me ask you, as she's, when she walked into the room, I knew she was going to be fun because she already had a rocks glass in her hand with bourbon in it.
I gave her that, Mike. Like,
Can you let me have nothing? Actually, this is Denny's favorite tasting glass. I stole it.
Yeah,
we've got a guy that made those out of New Orleans. They were all.
So has there ever been a point, Jane, where you were like, you tasted some barrels and you're like, I'm gonna have to tell Denny this doesn't taste quite right. Has there been that point?
There wasn't the hesitation. It's I can't wait to tell Denny this doesn't taste
right. Now that is the accurate version.
No, here's what's so amazing about makers. And this is not just because I work, like it really is incredible how much as a distillery at the size and scale we are, how much we still rely on the human nose more than any other piece of equipment. It is very rare something goes wrong in our process, knock on wood, because from Doug Wade unloading the corn and doing a sniff test as basic as water with corn and heating it in the microwave for 20 seconds and having a smell, because if that grain's been sitting in a bin a long time, you can smell it. Travis has the team really looking at each fermenter, and it's very rare. Now, granted, some weird things happen. Rarely is it this tastes bad. It's this tastes different and why.
And we normally know before it goes in the barrel if it's a little off. Because from a distillation standpoint, if something's going to go wrong, it's going to be in the distillery. As Jane said, whether it's the grain coming in, whether it's the water that we use, and we use our own lake, right? So we don't use city water. We use our own lake that comes direct into the distillery.
You have an algae problem.
We propagate our own yeast, right? So do we have, when it comes to fermentation and using your own yeast, it's a numbers game. So are your yeast healthy enough to pretty much outcompete all the other bacteria that naturally exist in the environment? And so, you can have things that can kind of go wrong in fermentation. And as Jane said, Travis and the team over there, that, our distillery runs 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 48 weeks out of the year. And, I know I've got the title master distiller. The reality is we've got 20 master distillers, right? And what they're able to do to control the consistency and the quality of that distillate is pretty phenomenal. So typically, if it's going to be off, we're going to get it in the distillate, and then we can kind of flag it as it goes in the barrel and then pull samples through maturation to see if it's anything that might be picked up on the finished whiskey side. And it's very, very, very rare that it is. It's hardly ever a surprise. I'll say that.
Yeah. Not a lot of surprises. In certain compounds, you can mature out.
Yeah.
Others are going to be there and the barrel can exacerbate. So there's maturation techniques that you can either try to limit that as much as you can based on the environment you give the barrel to, or, hey, I can blend a couple of these into a 378 batch or whatever.
Well, and that's where, so, when I was talking before about blending, that's exactly what happens, right? So it's not like, we're basically a 6-year-old product and we'll do 700 barrels a day, easy. It's not like in 6 years, we dump those exact same 700 barrels that were made all on the same day. Like you will kind of flex that a little bit, maybe 30 days forward or backward. And you're trying to, blend it so that it's very consistent It's still high quality. And so there's all those things that go into it. Like when we formulate our dumps, it's a pretty intense process. It's not an easy thing.
One of the things we've been working on, Beth and I, the last 2 years, and it's been so much fun because the quality department is so far reaching and they're so overwhelmed between bottling and, you know, all of the food safety stuff because we have
packaging side.
That, you know, we have the highest ISO standards and all those things. And there's not been time to really play a lot of offense necessarily down here traditionally is how I would say it. And so Beth and I have been building, we have 49 warehouses over 4 different locations housing 1.1 million barrels of Maker's Mark. So for the last 2 years, Beth and I have been actually studying each individual warehouse to build maturation scales. So as you start thinking about formulation, it becomes easier and tighter. Because what I love about this place, you turn around, Mike, and there's an 1889 rick house that's 4,000 barrels, open floors, 3 stories. But then you drive into town and there's a 58.8 that's 7 stories that the ricks look totally different. You don't have those open floor. You have 2 totally different maturation environments. What's the behavior and personality of each to help create more consistency? It's a very different way of thinking about it.
And the bigger you get, the tighter you have to be about that. Like the bigger you get, the more you have to understand all these influences on the whiskey, whether it's in the distillery. And I mean, we need 11,000 acres of corn every year, right? So whether it's really understanding that and dialing in on that to the barrels that we need every year and the specs that we need to build those barrels to, as Jane said, 49 warehouses, 4 warehouse sites, different elevations, different number of barrel capacities,
different water bodies of water near that's going to change the humidity ratio in those warehouses.
So just when you think like, well, it's the industry's the industry, you have it figured out. Then you really, when you want to dig in, really start to figure out there's a lot of variation that can exist. Even in a brand like Maker's, when we've been making the same mash bill for 68 years, you have to understand these things in order to keep that consistency. And it's awesome. It's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work too.
As the distillery's grown though, when was your like first day coming here? Do you remember?
The first time that I was here, I came in January of 2003.
And what about you, Jane?
I came in, I want to say it was like March 7th, 2007.
I want to say 2003, 2004 was the first time my wife and I had ever came here. We were on the way to Texas from Michigan. We were stationed up in Michigan at the time, and we drove down to Texas to go hunting. And on the way back, it was just her and I, and we're like, hey, let's stop in Kentucky and drink some bourbon. She's like, oh, that sounds like a great idea.
As before the Bourbon Trail.
Yeah.
Nothing was called a bourbon trail.
We stopped here, and I think that little building right there,
the restaurant,
was where you dipped
under the stairs.
Yeah,
you did it weird. Under the stairs.
Yeah, it was the first time we ever dipped a bottle and stuff. And then the next time I got to come down here was with our son and his wife. Now, that was the next time, almost 20 years later, and I was like, what the heck is this? This
changed a lot.
So much bigger. We went and he dipped his bottles over the new gift shop and stuff. And I was like, I personally don't like it because I liked the little old place. And, that to me, that I was like, man, I got pretty much put my hand in a barrel of beer and suck on my fingers. I was like, oh, this is so good. Funny thing about that bottle of Maker's Mark that we got that day, we let somebody stay at our house on Thanksgiving. Why we did that, I don't know. We said, hey, nobody else comes over to our house except for your girlfriend and you. Here's the turkey you need. Here's all the food you need, but stay away from our liquor cabinet. Stay away from our wine. Do not go in our bedroom at all. Stay out of our bedroom. And that's pretty much it. So we come back, that Maker's bottle was empty. Several bottles of German wine were gone that were, I don't know, from the 70s.
Oh my goodness.
And my wife automatically known. She was like, somebody slept in our bed.
Oh,
I was furious. But how much of this place has changed, and probably you two kind of grew up here in the industry and watching it change, and maybe that's a little difficult, or maybe it's prideful and saying, man, we've really built this into a great brand.
It's so funny. We talk about this all the time because this distillery is the town. It is Loretto. The community works here essentially.
Well, yeah, it's the analogy when people talk about a college town, we're a distillery town.
We are a distillery
without a
town.
doubt.
It's like
bourbon
to
town,
the extreme. Yeah.
And I think you have multi-generational employees, and we all remember, I mean, the first time I visited was a college class at Transy in May of 2003. And then when I came back to work 4 years later, you're right, it was totally different even then. And we were, gosh, I think when I started, we were like a 600,000 case brand.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about this because it's hard, right? People remember what it was like 20 years ago, and it wasn't as busy, and it wasn't as crowded, and it wasn't as hectic. But the reality is the growth is great. Bourbon is having a moment, and it provides jobs, good jobs. It provides a tourism base for Kentucky where, we get 170,000 visitors a year. People make the pilgrimage. And so part of that is we loved that little gift shop just like you did. But we also, when people come this far, whether it's driving on their way to Texas, or we want to be able to show them the hospitality that this brand has always been known for. So we've had to grow to keep up with that demand because we never turn people away. That's the number one rule here.
Well, and what's been interesting about that, from a production standpoint, I don't know that you would know the difference, right? Like you might go in the distillery and notice we added another mash tub, another distillation set, but it's not plainly evident. If you go into bottling, you're going to see that it looks identical to what it did 20 years ago. We're still hand dipping every bottle. Maybe the line's running a little faster. Maybe we've got 6 dippers now instead of 4, but I don't know that you would notice it from a production standpoint. But as Jane said, from an experience standpoint, it has changed, because when I started in 2003, I mean, we were like at 25,000 visitors.
You couldn't even taste whiskey then legally. You weren't allowed to even host a tasting.
Yeah, there was nobody could taste.
Yeah.
Until I don't think we tasted whiskey that day.
Until like 08,
yeah,
07,
it was 08, and we built the new gift shop to be able to do tastings.
The idea of having a tasting room, our tasting room was our lab, because that's where we tasted the distillate, the bottling samples. There was no thought that a visitor would ever taste. So
how many employees came here on a 3rd grade field trip and got to dip a bottle 30 years ago? Could you imagine?
So it definitely has evolved greatly from the visitor side. I think the core of it hasn't changed, especially as you go into production. But we're also, cognizant of the fact that, the Bourbon Trail has evolved, and, people that come to Kentucky, they're now coming for, 3-4 days to do the Bourbon Trail. And we have to offer different things too. Like you get still fatigue, right? Like we talk about that. Like, have you seen one still? Have you seen them all? Well, maybe not all, but it's a still. So what are the things that we can do that are a little bit different? That's why the bulk of our tours are outside. You'll be able to go in the distillery. We've got nature trails now. We've got different tasting experiences. We have an incredible restaurant that serves cocktails. So yes, from the visitor experience side, I think it will continue to evolve and change. From a production side, when you're in the heart of our operation and the nuts and bolts,
there's just more of everything.
It's more,
to your point. There's 62 fermenters instead of 20.
Well, we're going to take a break real quick. Listeners, stay with us. When we come back, I want to talk about distilling. We've talked about blending a little bit, and then let's talk about 46, changing your bottles out.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I'd like to discuss is what else you got coming down the pike, if there's anything coming down the pike. So stay with us, listeners. Hey, listeners, if you want to come see us, we're going to be at USA Cares Gala on July 23rd at the Galt House in downtown Louisville. You can check out usacares.org. Get your tickets for that. We're going to be there with a bourbon pool from many, many distilleries. I think the ticket's $50 for that bourbon pool. There's going to be other awesome items there for auction. So come check us out. We'll be in our bow ties, our black suits. Come see us there. We're also going to be August 6th, we'll be at the Southern Whiskey Society's event down in Franklin, Tennessee with Made South. We got 2 amazing picks that we did for that. One from Leaper's Fork, another one's from Leaper's Fork that you will have to be at the event to get. A bottle of bourbon does come with your ticket, so check that out. You can go to madesouth.com and buy those tickets today. We'll also be at Bourbon on the Banks October 1st in Frankfort, Kentucky, the capital of Kentucky. It's a super quaint capital city. You don't want to miss that event. We'll have the Bourbon Road Lounge. We'll have a sponsor in our tent with us. There will be a distillery. You want to come check it out. One of the biggest things this year that changed was House Bill 500 that allowed distilleries to sell at festivals, so you can buy whiskey there. I just talked to Diane Strong, and she's super excited about it. She's fixing to put some information out. Come hanging out in the Bourbon Road Lounge. We'll have our bourbon furniture there. Both of our sponsors will be there also. Cruise Customs Flags and Seldom Seen Farms with his amazing maple syrup aged in bourbon barrels. We would really love you to come drink at our tent with us, take some photos, buy one of our Bourbon Bullshitter t-shirts or any other piece of our swag that we have. We would appreciate it. All right, listeners, we are back, and I'm with these 2 jokers, Jane Bowie and Denny Potter, here at Maker's Mark. Worried about background noise in this room. We are having a good time making some memories here, drinking whiskey together. And they've already made me feel like family inside this room.
Oh, absolutely.
Here. Yeah.
You sit in our heritage room, you're definitely family.
The only thing that bothers me in this room is that decanter sitting over there, and I just want to. If I thought nobody was watching, I probably would have snuck some whiskey.
Mike, as far as we know,
it's iced tea.
That's tea.
Really?
We'd have no idea what's in there.
We have no idea. It's been there.
It's been there a million
when
years.
I started in January of 2003, it was there, and it's been at that same level since 2003. So I'm pretty sure
we should taste it. I've never tasted it.
Can we do it?
Hell yeah, we can.
Because let Jane do it, because
she'll get in trouble.
Jane's the type that can get by with it.
Well, Bill and Rob stay mad at me, so whatever.
Can we taste it? I want to taste it because Rob said that is. He told me that's whiskey in there. I gotta figure this out.
Denny's so uncomfortable.
No, I'm not. I'm not uncomfortable about tasting it. I'm uncomfortable about your ability to pour it out of that.
My guess is whatever's in there tastes like absolute shit. But
I say we taste it.
If it's whiskey, I would disagree with that.
Do you want me to pour it now?
Let's go ahead and pour it. We can sip on that on the second half.
I'm going to look, Denny, I'm going to
Can I give a play-by-play? Because I'm not worried about the whiskey. I'm worried about,
Are you capable of giving a play-by-play?
Her ability.
I feel like you're more the color commentary. Play-by-play is probably a little too skilled for you.
I mean, you argue everything with me.
Even your birthday card, Denny's birthday was fun. Even your birthday card was like me being competitive in a really passive aggressive.
She can get you a gift.
I did. I brought cupcakes to work.
Oh yeah, she did.
She brought a cupcake.
I brought a cupcake.
No, a lot of cupcakes
for the entire leadership team.
No, they were excellent.
We're going to get to supposedly drink. So I don't know what's in that bottle.
All right,
I'm so glad you came, Mike, because this is.
You've been wondering. It's been killing you too.
Well, you know what's fun? I mean, it's one of those things I just kind of never paid much attention to.
I tell you what, we've been in so many different distilleries. And I mean, like we were talking about balconies in the break. Now she's got this gigantic, that thing is humongous too.
Yeah. She's trying to get the stopper out of it. It's not going well. The way she's holding it, I'm just glad I'm not married to her. I'll tell you that right now. There's no love in that.
Look at her. She
can't. She can't do it. My God.
It's glued in there. This thing is total for show.
Oh, sure, it's glued in there.
Try it.
It's a rubber stopper.
Give her a go.
Now Denny's going to try to open it up. Maybe it's no go on the 1965.
I'll do the play-by-play. He leans down to pick up the decanter.
Oh, it's got a glass stopper.
It's a glass stopper it's not budging.
I bet they did glue it in there.
I think it's glued in there.
Well, dang it. Got me excited for nothing.
Got a lighter? I know you do.
I don't, but I can find one within a stone's throw because the distillery is right behind me.
It wouldn't be that difficult to get open.
I'm
more worried about snapping.
Oh, don't do it. Don't do it. I don't want you to snap it.
I want to know what's in it now, though.
Well, we'll do this.
Now
we'll take
we know
a break.
why it hasn't evaporated.
We'll
at
take
all.
another break. And after we finish this discussion, we'll see if we can get that open.
We'll call the engineering department.
This was presented in 1985. So
it's probably a 1985 something.
It's not.
You don't think so?
I don't know.
well, I mean, it's at least before 2003.
Jane, were you born before 1985?
I was born in 1981. I love that you thought maybe I wasn't, though.
So you were like 4 when this came out.
The shape of the decanter, this is how my brain works, is going to, what is that? How's that oxidizing? I bet it's good because if you look, the head space
I really do think it's probably bourbon in there.
It looks so healthy.
We're too lazy to mix up a batch of tea to put in there.
Bill Samuels would never, ever, ever do that.
It is dark too.
It's dark.
Maybe that is some of the original.
Because it's oxidized though. Look at that. You've got some evaporation in the neck.
I think it's going to be good. We'll take a break and we'll see if we can get this thing.
I might text Bill and say, how do I get into this thing?
It's probably nobody's ever touched it.
No, this is the rules of makers, right? Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
I'm sorry. I broke your decanter and drank the whiskey inside.
We snapped it at the neck.
Janie, well, I don't know why we let you touch anything down there.
And we don't know why you put iced tea in there, Bill.
This is from it says from New York in it. I wonder if that was like a bottle somebody.
There will be a story that might be true or not, but it'll be a good story.
The gold wax and stuff we used to do back then.
Yeah.
Very well.
I've never seen a decanter like that.
It's pretty nice. I think that's more of a wine decanter.
It kind of looks like a bowling ball and a bowling pin had a baby, Denny. For those of you that need a visual.
Like the avocado and the acorn.
The one thing that I would hate to say is that it's an extremely accurate descriptor.
It is.
I mean, it pretty much is, yeah. So Denny, you're the master distiller here, but you didn't start out as a master distiller in your life, right? No,
I've always been, kind of rooted in operation. So I'm our master distiller, but I'm also our plant manager. So it's really, I'm our plant manager and our master distiller. So yeah, I mean, when I started out in the industry, I started out in the lab at Jim Beam in 98, working quality. And, I've always got a background in science and ended up being kind of got on the environmental side, as you said. I mean, you've already alluded to it, but, one of the things that people don't think about is there's a backside to all these operations that you have to be concerned about, whether it's the byproduct coming off the bottom of the still or the fact that these distilleries are located in the middle of nowhere and you're not tied to, a city or a county wastewater treatment plant. So, when I started out at Jim Beam, I ended up becoming the wastewater supervisor / operator. So I had to get certified in wastewater. So it's always been rooted kind of in that. And it's funny, that's really what allowed me to make some of these moves in the industry. It was really about the environmental and the wastewater side because nobody else wanted to do it. I get asked all the time, what's it take to be a master distiller? What do I have to do to be a master distiller? And the reality of it is, the easy answer is you got to be willing to do what nobody else wants to do. You have to. Like these are, you got to be willing to work nights, weekends, holidays. You got to be willing to legitimately play with crap, right? So it was the wastewater side that nobody in our industry had a lot of experience with. So when I left Jim Beam to come to Makers, I came as quality manager because that was a lot of my background. But the reality was they needed somebody that knew environmental because they had a wastewater treatment plant, and the guy that ran the wastewater treatment plant was leaving. And you had to have a certified wastewater treatment operator. That's why I got hired. Like, they liked the fact that I was great in quality, but it really was about, I mean,
this is killing Jay.
No, let's hear it. Get it out.
What's
Come
funny?
on now.
No, I have two things. What's funny is it wasn't until he came back, and Denny and I have been friends for 15 years. And
she calls it friends.
Stockholm syndrome, whatever. So
for everybody that doesn't know what Stockholm syndrome is, that is when somebody takes a hostage and they get to be such together for so long that the hostage gets to start loving the hostage taker.
I'm not sure.
So Mike, the question, who's the hostage in this? So that, not questioning the fact that it's Stockholm syndrome. We'll debate till the day I die. Who the hostage is in this.
So you got to remember, I'm 25 years old. So we have a heritage team, and I want you to go back to this in a minute, but this story is funny because I never knew why I thought your job was your job until you just told this story. So we have a heritage team. We've never had just a single spokesperson for the brand. So now our heritage team is Bill, Rob, Denny, and myself. And we split kind of the PR ambassadorial work amongst the four of us. And so back then, when I was in London, the heritage team was Denny, Kevin Smith, Bill, and Rob.
Rob was.
And so they said, you need to request, you get one heritage team visit. And I requested Denny because London bartenders were so into environmental stuff. And so I remember being like, this is Denny. He's our environmental engineer. And for a decade, I told everyone Denny was an environmental engineer because that's what I thought his job was. And so about when he came back 3 years ago, he's like, why do you keep telling people I'm an environmental engineer?
No, you kept telling everybody I was a turd herder. There's a big difference.
Well, no, they're like master distiller, my ass. He makes cattle feed for a living.
Makes cattle feed.
But that's why I never clicked. It never clicked till you started telling this story. But I always thought that was your background. I didn't know you were a biologist.
Well, it's very specialized, but it's not.
You're also passionate about it. You're acting like, this is just what you have to do. Watching him like look at an anaerobic digester in Japan, it's like the most alive I've ever seen Denny Potter.
That's not true. It
was like Christmas morning. You were holding shit, looking at it, giddy with these people in Japan with the digesters. Am I wrong?
It's fascinating.
Okay.
Like so what you do on the wastewater side is no different than what you do in fermentation. It's all biology. It's all microbiology. It's all, you're just using different, whether it's anaerobic bacteria or aerobic bacteria. Like you have these bugs that are naturally designed.
Twinkle in his eye, right?
Now, listeners, I want to remind you, you're listening to a bourbon podcast.
Yeah, I mean,
there's no bugs, I don't think, in your bourbon.
No, but we can't have bourbon unless you're taking care of the back end of that.
It's the tail that wags the dog.
It's the. I mean, as Jane said, we produce a hell of a lot more byproduct than we do whiskey. And if you don't have an answer for that, the rest of it, everybody is enamored. Everybody's enamored with distilleries. It's fascinating. I'm fascinated with it. I love it. I love the fact that we can bring in grain, bring in water, turn it into liquid gold.
Yeah, manufacturing agriculture into whiskeys.
It's fascinating.
It's like magic.
So where does your spent grain go to right now?
So we actually, we'll take our stillage and we'll dewater it through a centrifuge. And so we'll create what's called a wet cake. It's about 35% solids. But 35% solids, it's a solid. Like you can have it in your hand and squeeze it. No water comes out. So that gets brokered, gets sold as an animal feed. The water that comes out of that, the centrate that comes out of the centrifuge, will run through an evaporator. And so we'll condense that and we'll create a syrup. So it's a syrup that can go on the wet cake, which is more nutrients.
More protein.
Right?
Yeah.
More protein. or we sell it separate where people feed it straight up.
How do I
Boom,
get some
there
of
you
this
go.
for deer feed?
And
That's what I
then-
want to know.
Seriously, twinkle in his eye.
And then all you have to do then is create the condensate that comes out of the evaporator. And listen,
on the
man, I mean, I'm telling you right now, Mike, like if people want to know what's going to happen to our industry, people got to get on board with the byproduct side. People have got to get on board with what an industry solution is for byproducts. And it's not a, you know, we have solved it for us today singularly as Maker's Mark, but it's going to be it's an industry thing that we need to continue to discuss.
I think some people have, though. You know, I'm a big deer hunter, and here in Kentucky, there's a product called Buck's Bourbon deer feed, and it sells great, but it's just the byproduct, like you said. And maybe he even sells that syrup part too.
He might. I mean, listen, it's all. If he's marketing that way, it's the volume side. Like there is like we produce. I mean, what we produce per day, you cannot package singularly, right? Like our feed goes out by the trailer load.
Yeah,
that's how much you produce. Like by the trailer, like dump trailers, semi trailers.
Now times that by 92 distilleries.
So it's great to have something that's packaged up, whether it's in a 50-pound sack or whether it's, but that will never be the answer. It's the answer if you're doing 1 to 10 barrels a day, but the long-term solution, and you know, it's an industry. I mean, we're in a great place. Like we're in good shape, but those are the things that so there's that part of the business that when people want to jump into distilleries, nobody wants to think about or worry about. And then the other side is the packaging side.
Well, I think it you know, you're looking at a single package, but when I walk into a Tractor Supply or Roll King and I see pallets and pallets and pallets of that, because hunting industry is so big, and then you take and multiply that across every Tractor Supply in America. Maybe
but there
that
again,
is.
but here's the deal, and I don't know this specific product. What I can tell you is that's not normal. So wet cake lasts 4 days. It spoils in 4 days. DDG it's got a little longer shelf life. It's the shelf life of this product. So I don't know exactly what they're doing.
So then you'd have to have cattle. Then,
I'd love to understand, but the shelf life of this stuff, that therein lies some of the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're giving it away as a liquid, you've got a day, 2 days. It'll spoil. They won't eat it. If you've got a wet cake, you got about 4 days or mold will start growing on it. If you're a DDG, you have more time. You definitely have more time, but there is an absolute shelf life on this stuff.
Really?
Absolutely. No question about it.
Folks, this is the Insider Baseball. You've all been wondering what we sit around and talk about. You're welcome.
But back to the whole, yes, I've been rooted in operations. I've always, been intimately and passionate about the wastewater and the byproduct side. But that's allowed me, at least the first couple moves in my career to get to where I am today.
Cruising for sure, right?
Cruising for sure. Yeah. I mean, we were, I was asked to go down and run Cruising Rum for 3 years, which was a sister operation as general manager. But it was mainly because a lot of your rum plants that are located, they're all located in the Caribbean or Latin America or, Dominican Republic. They're direct discharge to the ocean. So whatever's coming off that still gets directly discharged to the ocean.
Really?
So Cruising, had an ambition to eliminate that direct discharge to the ocean, which is exactly one of the main reasons why I went down there. One was as general manager because they had just come into, our organization. So we had other things that we had to, kind of bring in line and put structure around. But the reality of it was we also had a goal of eliminating the direct discharge to the ocean. And that's how I got on there. So we were able to put in a system that took it's called spent vinasse or spent molasses, where we could run it through an evaporator. So condense the molasses, and then take that condensed molasses, ship it back to the US. And that's a great cattle feed, like, the nutrients involved in that. But then you got to deal with the condensate that comes off of that. So we were able to treat that multiple times through RO, and then take that as an absolutely clean water on an island that only has access to salt water, right? Like we had access to fresh water, but it was well water. So there's only so much you can use. So we were able to clean it up enough that we could take that water that was treated, as the condensate and put it back into fermentation. So we created a zero discharge facility. You know how hard that is in our industry? It's near impossible. And we were able to do that. And so those are the things that are super exciting to me, especially in an environment like that. Like we're lucky here in Kentucky. We got cheap energy. We've got all these other things. But when you're on an island and what you discharge to that ocean directly impacts everybody on that island. And not only that, the jobs associated with that distillery are so important. That's, to me, that's what's, extremely rewarding. So anyway, I mean, long story longer, I've done a lot of things in my career and I'm proud of a lot of different things that I've done, but it's things like that people may never, ever know about.
It's not
get to see that backside.
It's not the sexy side.
And nobody cares about it. Like,
yeah.
I mean, people are snoozing right now, but
no, they're not.
it is the part of our industry that, to me, if you know that side of it, the rest we'll figure out.
It probably makes your job as a master distiller a little bit easier to have that background. I mean, we're working right down the road, right? 45 minutes as a master distiller there, and then Heaven Hill, and then they ask you to, hey, would you like to come back?
Yeah, no doubt
to Maker's Mark. And Jane's like, hell yeah, he's coming back.
Oh, I remember us talking about it a lot before you made the decision, because we were still friends. Like we've stayed friends through the years.
It was a tough, leaving Heaven Hill was probably the toughest decision I've ever made in my career.
Probably.
Some people might not realize this, even listeners right now that have just gotten kind of into whiskey, or they really don't know the inside game of whiskey. But Maker's Mark is actually owned by Beam Suntory, right?
Yes. Beam Suntory.
What year did that happen?
2013, 2014.
Something, right around there, yeah.
And do you think that changed Makers at all?
No,
one of you kind of shaking your head.
No, we're in agreement. Yeah.
I think what's been interesting, Bill Sr. sold Makers 1983.
Or I think it's 81.
83 to Hiram Walker. Hiram Walker dissolved and it went to Allied DeMec. You joined during Allied DeMec.
Mm-hmm. I did.
Allied DeMec dissolved and it was Fortune Brands, which owned Jim Beam. So it's never been owned by Jim Beam. I joined right after that. And then Suntory came in. And I think what's interesting, Suntory's probably been the most closest aligned to Makers as a company.
Yeah.
But what's been amazing, and I don't, Bill always says the only contract we had was I keep the keys to the warehouse. I have no idea if that's true or not. It sure feels true because even though we've not been family owned since the 80s, we have been family operated all 68 years.
But Bill could still walk on campus today to the distillery and he could go anywhere he wants.
Rob is our managing director
Painfully
globally.
So.
Yes. That's a very...
He just has a drill in hand.
If you're listening, Bill, you're a pain in the ass. But Rob is our managing director. I mean,
Jane and I both report to Rob Sanders.
He runs the brand globally. And so this brand has been family operated. It's kind of the best of both worlds because you have this wonderful family. We tease Rob and Bill. They think we're still 8 people in a loft. We're kind of a big brand. They're like, we don't need hierarchy and let's stay flat. And it's like, well, we have 274 employees now. Like we need, and then Suntory is such a fabulous owner because they're family owned. And I've been training under the Suntory blender for the last 2 years. So getting access to really learn how Yamazaki's put together and Hakushu and Hibiki and understanding what they do and their commitment to quality is just, I've never seen.
Very refreshing.
It is unbelievable. So it's really, you've got this great owner who's like, we're just going to leave you alone. If it's not broke, don't fix it. We're here if you need us for things like learning and best practices, but we're family operated for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about something that wasn't broken. You fixed it.
46.
No,
It's debatable.
So you had Maker's Mark cast strength in this just amazing little bottle.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it.
I
It was
didn't
one of
like
the
it.
nicest looking bottles on the shelf. And one day I walk in a liquor store and I'm like, just broke my heart almost.
But we took the price down. Did you like that part?
I don't even care about that.
$10 a bottle.
Yeah, we made it more affordable for people.
A lot of people probably do enjoy that, but that bottle was just, I don't know. I look at that bottle and I'm like, yeah, it's just.
You know what's funny? I can't even remember what it
It
looked
was like squattier and heavier.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah.
Rob loved it. I did not like it. We were a house divided on that bottle.
So here's a big difference on that one too, Mike. Like that was a bottle that a lot of the labeling like was done off site. Like that product, a lot of the packaging from the exterior side of the bottle was done off site.
Yeah, I'm sure for cost wise and bring
no,
it
it
up
wasn't
in
even
house.
cost.
But
It was
we
a
didn't
quality.
we didn't have control of the package.
It was
quality.
a quality issue. I don't know if you remember all the labels. Part of what pushed us, the labels kept falling off. We
it was
couldn't
a
keep them
disaster.
on. It was. We're control freaks at Maker. We are control freaks. Our print shop produces 70,000 labels a day.
And now you're 46.
It was part of the same reason. Oh, sorry. It was quality. Like, let's bring it all back in house. And I like a label versus a deco personally.
Quality and understanding what it is. I mean, listen, Kevin Smith and I were, big parts of the project to create Maker's
with Diane
46
Rogers. Give Diane
with Diane. I mean, so back in 2008 is when Bill tasked us with that. So when we were able to finally come up with his taste vision on the liquid side, and then we saw the package, this is the first thing we've ever done outside of classic Makers, and all of us are like, oh my God, that's a beautiful bottle. We love it. We love it. We love it. The problem we had for 10 years, we're going on 11 years, right? 12 years of Maker's 46 is nobody understood it. That 46, I couldn't tell you. So it's 46 months old. It's 46 proof. So trust me, we've got 5% that understand everything. You
Sure.
got 95% that have no clue.
Oh, I've had people tell me that about 46 before. They're like, oh, it's only 46 proof.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm
Or
going to
s-
say it. It's a stupid name.
Or I've had somebody tell me that was 46 years old, and I was like,
Yeah.
no way. Nope.
Well, and then he made it 47% ABV just to.
So it was, and then, so there was some of that, like, even, 10, 11 years later, it was about 10 years later, we started looking at, we really need to think about this package because there was so much confusion around it. And as we went out and did focus groups and everything else, it was evident that we needed to change the package. And so really what you see now is one, so all that package, like that bottle, even when you look at the wood finishing bottle, which is the same 46 bottle, that's all done off site. That's all pre-decoed off site. We are at the mercy of a third party on our package quality. And Mike, I couldn't tell you how many times, one, it never shows up on time. And then two, when it does show up, you're having to reject 20% of your bottles, which, oh, by the way, impacts launch dates, impacts availability on the shelf. And those are the things that people scream about. So for us to have the ability to, bring that package in-house, do the label in-house, and then on top of it, it tells the story. Because the thing that stands out prevalent on that, one is Bill's name, and then two is French oaked. I've got family that have known 46 since before we even introduced it. I have family that have samples of stuff that we rejected that never came out to be 46, but it was like profile 37 or profile
51.
42.
Maker's 51.
That when we release that package, I'll get a text. I love this French oaked. I mean, how did you guys come up with that? And it's like, it's Maker's 46. I've been telling you for 12 years that they're French oak staves, and they have no idea. So it's telling the story.
I also love just having a label. Like,
Yeah.
So the new bottles of any of the Private Select will be in the standard Maker's bottle?
No.
That's staying for now. Operationally, that bottle, it's beautiful. It's a nightmare logistically.
I can get that. When you outsource something,
Yeah.
and those hassles, that it probably drives both of you insane. I get it. And I wanted our listeners to know the reason why.
No. And well, and I can tell, just speaking from the quality side. So, look at that FAEO2 bottle, which was a 46 bottle.
All of our wood finishing lives in that
bottle. It's a
bottle.
private select bottle, but look at that bottle, right? Narrow base, thick shoulders. Imagine trying to run that bottle on a bottling line on a conveyor. What do you think's going to happen when that bottling line's running and you get any herky-jerky motion or anything else?
Oh, it wants to tip over.
It's going to tip over. Yeah. From a food safety standpoint, your number one concern on packaging
glass breakage
is glass inside the bottle, not glass breakage.
So you're taking a big drink and there's glass
inside the bottle. So if you get a chip finish on the lip of that or anything else, so when we have a bottle that tips over, we remove 10 bottles before it and 10 bottles after it. And when they're not only that, it's the tipping. When they're already pre-decoed, we've already bought it.
I've actually had a bourbon bottle with glass inside of it before.
That is our worst nightmare.
That's what keeps him up at night.
It scared me because I poured the glass and I drank some and I'm looking in it. I'm like, what is that? Did I drink glass?
No doubt about it. So when you think about things like we love the package, we love all of it, that is an issue running on the bottling line. And people don't ever want to think about the packaging side. But if you're thinking about not just packaging, but package quality, right? Those are the things that absolutely.
Don't even get us started on cork versus screw caps.
Well, I've drank some cork before. Yeah. I'm pretty positive about it.
The packaging, we could do 100 podcasts on the packaging side, like why people choose what they choose and, why you do what you do or why you alter or, kind of pivot. I didn't know it's not super interesting to people, but
I think it is because they want to know when they go in there and they see a change and people notice change. Maybe it is that 5 or 10% or that 1% of whiskey drinkers.
A lot of what you see too, Mike, like especially the last 5 years, people are putting liquid in packages that it's not their desired package. It's whatever glass mold they can get their hands on.
Supply chain's a nightmare.
You see a lot going in wine bottles right now because they can't get
PET, which
round molds are, typically easier to get because of wine. And so, you get into the packaging side, it's a whole nother conversation.
Well, since we're talking about production, let's shift over to the future innovation because I've got Miss Innovation in here with me. Are we going to see something new from Maker's Mark in the near future?
Yes.
And what is it? You got to tell me. Come on now.
Yeah, right. Here's what I would say.
We're not going to see a rye though.
Hell no.
No. Unless stuff's going on that I have no idea. But
we'll quit that day.
Here's what I'll say.
Toasted.
Our innovation department,
which is two people,
myself and Beth Buckner.
I'm kind of included because I have to be.
You're like the mascot.
Well, it's part of the title.
So we are set up. Our primary objective is to study where flavor comes from, whether that's the agricultural side or the manufacturing side. So things like that injury proof project, that was an 8-year project looking at process, looking at things that we do and we don't really know the impact necessarily they have from a flavor perspective. We're doing similar things with fermentation set temperatures, fermentation times, looking at, back set percentage, like all these things that are just handed down over generations, but you don't really know why it matters or how it would change if you changed it. On the agriculture side, you talked about wheat. I want to walk you out. We're growing barley here. And it's the most majestic looking grain. I'm a wheat girl through and through. Barley is beautiful. It looks majestic. And we've been growing our grains here, not to really use, but just to understand that flavor source and looking at varieties, looking at seeding rates, looking at cover crop rotations, looking at nitrogen inputs and farming techniques, because when you look at the last 70 years with wheat production, it's changed drastically as it's become more commodity driven and more yield. And so what flavors lost along the way? And with modern varieties, you can breed for yield and disease resistance, but you can also breed for flavor. And there's a big movement in the baking industry that's happening. And so Beth and I spend our days just studying where flavor comes from. So what I feel like we're doing for Maker's Mark it's not even for our generation. We are building the blueprints for future innovators at Maker's Mark to understand all these flavor levers, to dream up these new whiskeys and to understand how to go make them, whether it's changing up the agriculture or tweaking the processes. And that's really, so what I'll tell you, I'm not going to tell you what's coming from us, but what I'm going to tell you, it's thoughtful. It's different. Right. We are not a Me Too brand in terms of, you look at our single barrel program, it's different because it needed to be. We couldn't do it the way Heaven Hill does it or the way Four Roses does it. And theirs are wonderful. We had to do it the Maker's way. So yes, there will be things coming. Yes, I think it will surprise traditional makers consumers. But I think it's work I'm super proud of, and that we've worked hard to be really thoughtful about the next generation of whiskey coming out of Star Hill Farm.
Any triticale in there?
No, I can't even spell that.
You can't even spell it. Do you even know what I'm talking about?
The grain. Yeah.
I'm just wondering now. I'm wondering about the barley. How much different does barley look than wheat?
Totally different. It's feathery.
We'll show you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed when you pulled in and parked, but we've got about what do we have, like 7 acres out here?
Right here.
Half wheat, half barley. It's kind of cool. It's amazing.
And we've got test plots with the University of Kentucky we've been doing for 5 years where we grow different varieties of wheat and we look at, terroir and whiskey. We were talking about Texas. Rob Arnold wrote a book about it. And 5 years ago, I'd been like, let's take this outside. That's bullshit. The truth is, it does exist. Now, by the time you grow it, mill it, cook it, ferment it, distill it, age it, there are correlations. That is decade-long work,
sure.
Right? And we are looking at that stuff just to understand. But it is definitely, we are an agricultural product. And I think people don't think about whiskey being agriculture, but it is.
I personally do because I, work for the Coast Guard and I'm always worried about barges moving up and down the river.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I don't think people realize how much corn travels up and down the river. Wheat and rye, not so much, but corn, there's more corn rolling up and down Ohio and in Mississippi River than people eat.
Well, and then international now. I mean, barley and rye. I mean, those are big international products now.
And barley traditionally was, it was a horse feed. You didn't have malting quality barley. And there's 2 varieties now that are being grown in Kentucky. Denny and I sit on a small grains council.
Yeah. Why they let us on, I have no idea.
I know why they let me on. I don't know why you're there. But
because she walks in with a rocks glass full of whiskey.
No, that's exactly right. No joke. First meeting. That's exactly what happened.
I love it. It's so fascinating.
And they had pizza, which I was all in.
But it's, barley is not it's a cooler climate weather grain, but the barleys they've developed here, there's 2 varieties. They're called Violetta and Calypso. The Calypso is a little more fruit forward. The Violetta is more your traditional, and the flavor is unbelievable. But imagine right now, right? Look at barley. It's coming from the Plain States, Canada, and Europe. We are living through a pandemic and supply chain is a big problem. Imagine if you can change the supply chain in Kentucky where suddenly farmers can grow all of our ingredients right here. Yeah. It's better for the environment. It's more sustainable. It's more cost effective. You don't, right? Like these. So a lot of what I do is dream about what the world looks like in 50 years.
I'm sure that if you guys could get to a point where everything that Maker's Mark needed would be within 15 or 20 miles from here, that's the dream.
And everything we do, everything's 60 miles except the barley. Sure. The corn and the wheat are right here.
But soon to be the barley from here too.
From a business standpoint, I mean, that's the dream. Our most expensive grain is barley because we do not grow it and source it here.
So you got to get on a rail car, then into a truck, and then it's still got to be.
Well, a lot of times it's got to get on a barge.
Yeah.
Right. And come in. I mean, it's.
So, I mean, and this is not fast work. This is slow. It's a slow grind.
Well, let's talk about something that you could do fast, like a finishing.
Yep. We do that.
Because, I know you do in 46, but people tell me, other distillers say, hey, we can't make a toasted wheat because it will be too sweet and bourbon drinkers won't drink it.
We've done a lot of. So here's what I'll say about toasted barrels.
I mean, who would ever say that there's a bourbon that's too sweet that's not a flavored bourbon? Like, I get it if it's a flavored bourbon, but
here's where I struggle with toasted barrels for Maker's Mark. And I think the Elijah Craig one's delicious. The Basil Hayden toast. Yeah. Andrea Wilson's my personal hero. I'm obsessed with her. I try to like really be cognizant of how often I text her because I'm obsessed with her.
Stalker status.
Very much so. I love her. So Michter's, they wrote the book on toasted barrels.
Delicious.
So wonderful.
My favorite Michter's right there.
And they get
amazing.
better and better. I think every distillery's got to have their own guardrails for innovation. What's right for one doesn't mean it's right for another. So like some of the things we focus on is agriculture. So sherry finishes, or you look at Angel's Envy and what they do. It's wonderful. It works for them.
Yeah.
We would never do that because one of the rules for ourselves is flavors coming from agriculture.
Sure.
And is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know.
But isn't oak tree agriculture?
It is. That's why we do it. Right. So we're not doing these finishes. One of the other rules with finishing, and this is a personal thing that I feel pretty strongly about. And again, I don't know if it's right or wrong. It just works for us. I don't want to taste how the sausage is made. And what I mean by that is we will have these products and Andrew Weaver will be like, oh my God, I love it. And even Dolby would love it. I can taste the barrel influence. If I can taste the wood influence, we've not made something new. All we've done is we've taken this really great whiskey and we've taken this wood and we've just said, here you go. The whole goal for us for finishing is to create something new where the two things come together to be cohesive and harmonious, to really give you something different. The thing we have found with toasted barrels, and again, I think they're delicious. You can taste the toasted barrel. The flavor is so impactful. Mm-hmm. We've not found a way to integrate it where you're not getting the whiskey, you're not getting, and I'm not saying, again, not right or wrong. We've not found with our whiskey how to integrate them in a way that we feel like is magical.
You got to find out. You got to find out.
Again,
we've tried.
No, listen, Mike, there's no doubt we could do it and sell every bottle, but we're already allocated.
It just isn't us.
Makers is already allocated. So it's one of those, you got to be very purposeful about.
98% of our finishing experiments end up on the editing floor. Like if I walked you over to the lab right now, there's hundreds of bottles of experiments, toasted barrels, open fire precision toasting, water baths, double toasting, different things. Like we've tried it in pursuit of flavor. It just hasn't worked for us.
I guess this fat guy will just have to keep dreaming. I just have to keep dreaming. Now, while she's talking all that, and then she said she didn't want to see where the sausage was made.
I don't want to taste how the sausage is made.
Well, I was like, she's an Instagram stalker. I know because we had this guy say that we were giving away some Woodford, and
he got that from me.
The guy said, I don't want to see where it was a tour at Woodford. And he was like, I don't want to see where the sausage was made. And I was like,
that's a Bill.
Wait a minute.
That's a Billism.
Yeah,
Bill Samuels has been saying that.
I was like, who is this fella?
Yeah. No, I don't want to taste what I want it to be something new.
If you do, it's a bit synthetic, right? Like for us, like it's just a bit, if you can taste process or you can taste influence.
I will tell you, you're going to love though. We just put to bed a couple months ago this year's wood finishing release. And the whole thing with this series is we planned the first 5 years before we started. So this first wood finishing series was a 5-year installment of stories we wanted to tell, flavor stories. And they're very process focused. So, year 1 was yeast, year 2 was air drying the wood, year 3 was fatty acid esters. This year we're going to do barrel rotation. And
awesome.
So what's also happened is we started quite close in, and we felt like we've earned the faith of our consumers to start getting a little crazier creative and outside the box. So this is going to be, it's the first time we wanted true toasty notes in a Makers. You're going to love BRT01. It's
BRT, Mike. Did you catch that? BRT.
Barrel rotation.
We suck at naming things, but I
actually like it.
We've embraced it.
I'm embracing the bad.
Has this already been bottled and it's ready to?
It's not bottled. We finished.
SC4 PR5,
4x5.
RC6,
RC6. That
You know what?
good.
FAE01,
Here's the thing.
FAE02.
What's Willy Wonka is,
BRT01.
if you guys could get a better naming convention out there, we'll give you
Why is
not
this
our,
on us?
our distillery.
Are you talking to me?
No,
The listeners.
The
Yeah.
listeners.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Quit make-
170,000 people.
Quit-
listening.
Denny, quit making it about you.
God, I hate it when you say that.
Because I say it all the time.
Again, I'm going to step into it.
But you will love this one. It is purposely toasty because when you walk to the top of a warehouse and you get that dry spice in the wood and it's a really certain smell and extraction and you get those toasty wood notes, that is put into this whiskey.
I think I probably will love it.
You'll love it.
Well, I know we're up against the time here. I can't thank you.
Are we?
Well, we could keep talking forever for me.
He's like, please shut the hell up.
We could do this. We could do this episode 1 and 2. But I can't thank you two enough. Listeners, this has been Story Time with Jane and Denny.
I like that I got top billing.
Or Denny and Jane.
No,
Whichever
no,
way
Mike,
you want.
no.
Stick with the first one because I don't want to have to deal with the fallout once we end all this.
I didn't want her to leave here and be like, that big son of a bitch, he didn't name me first. What is going on with him? No, seriously, I just can't thank you both enough for bringing me inside your house and sharing your whiskey with me. We're still going to try to open this decanter.
We'll break it, I think, before we officially get it open.
But thank you very much just for bringing us in here, letting our listeners know about everything Maker's Mark, kind of the inside on both of you, some inside stories and stuff. That's what a podcast is supposed to be about. Just in-depth knowledge, I think. We do have a giveaway before we leave here for our listeners. What do we got, Denny?
Well, I mean, I think what would be really cool is, a bottle obviously signed, and we'll figure out what it is. I mean, something that's kind of hard to get. But I think the really cool thing
maybe
is
the FAO too, if that was his whiskey of the year.
It was our whiskey of the year.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
You got some of those? Because I mean, you
I don't.
stash them away. I never know what you
but
have.
real quick, do you know what he does?
Oh,
This is so annoying. So
Here we
we're
go.
neighbors. He comes to my house. We live 0.2 miles from each other as the crow flies. So he comes over.
Or a minute and a half by electric bike.
Denny has an electric bike.
It looks like a motorcycle, and I feel like such a badass.
It. He thinks it looks like a
No,
motorcycle.
I look like a 49-year-old badass.
Sure. My 5-year-old makes fun of you. Anyway, he comes over to my house and I'll, the next day I'll go in to like put glassware away. We have about 3 different bars in our house and he'll have signed like 20 bottles while he's in my house.
Every time I go over, I sign
He just
a bottle.
signs bottles.
Don't even have to be a Maker's
It's
bottle.
not even a Maker's bottle. It'll just
Just be some old crow.
It infuriates her.
It'll be like, Jade, I blended this one just for you.
Yeah. So RC6, which I just came on board. It was literally getting released. And there are people I'm getting emails and feedback like, oh, Denny, since you came
Thank
back to
God
Makers,
you're back. You've
thank
saved
God
Makers.
this RC6 is amazing. So I will, I'll
I've been
go
working on it for 3 years.
Originally, when I went over, I would sign a bottle of RC6. Jane, aren't you so thankful that I was able to finish this whiskey and turn it into this beautiful juice that it is? Dennis P. Potter Jr., Master Distiller. I bet she does have at least 40 bottles that are signed.
He just signs random stuff in my house. But I think FAO2 would be a great bottle giveaway.
Yeah.
And Denny will sign it and hand deliver it to your house no matter where you live.
And then I think, we got a barrelhead. I think that, Jane and I will sign, and then Rob and Bill. And those don't exist. So that's a pretty cool one.
I think that's an amazing giveaway. So listeners, what you got to do to win that is comment #MakersMark on the comments below this post right here today on Instagram from the time we do the post until 10 o'clock at night, and I'll pick a winner. But #MakersMark, you got to reside in the United States and you got to be 21. You know how we do it and stuff. Well, Jane, Denny, like I said before, man, what an amazing conversation. I think our listeners are just going to love this. We've kept it pretty clean.
We've tried really hard.
I'm sure it was a struggle.
Like it's a big struggle.
Denny deserves.
As soon as we end this,
Denny
there's going to
deserves
be
like
a
a
string
medal.
of F-bombs. Not because
we didn't finish we didn't finish the weave ring. We never told the weave ring story.
He
we'll tell you
left
offline.
the gas station. Never pulled the nozzle
He
out.
drove around our campus all last week with gas. With
the gas nozzle sticking out the side of his truck. Yeah. No, this is the independent stave guy.
Oh, it's our friend at
Oh,
Independent Stave
man.
Company.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
You should get him on the show. You'd love
He's
him.
a good one.
So where can our listeners find you guys on social media?
That is a wonderful question.
I
Yeah,
don't have social media. Like I have an Instagram
TikTok
page.
Wiggles?
I have an Instagram page, but I mean, I've not been on it in probably 2 years.
I have an Instagram page, and I'm sporadic. I'm Jane Thomas Bowie.
Jane Thomas Bowie.
I mean, isn't it appropriate that she has, a
Like a
male
rock.
middle name?
I was one of those 2-name country kids. Thomas was my middle name. I was Jane Thomas till I was 6.
Of course you were.
She got a badass last name, though. I mean,
That's my married name. Bill and Rob still refuse to acknowledge I got married. I'm still Connor to them. Sometimes Bill hyphenates me if he's feeling generous.
it sounds better, Bowie, though.
Jane Connor, Jane Bowie.
Alex
Jane
will love
Bowie.
to hear that.
Yeah. It's like you're a knife.
She is. She stabs deep. And she already said she carries a
I'll
switchblade
cut you.
because she's from Monticello.
So you can find Maker's Mark at Maker's Mark on Instagram.
Yeah, I
on
would just
Facebook.
follow Maker's Mark. There's just dribble coming from us.
I mean, I've got
Just
a Facebook
dribble.
page, but I mean, all you're going to see here lately are pictures from my daughter's high school graduation.
Well, congratulations on that and becoming
Thank
an
you.
empty nester.
Yeah,
Sounds like Jane's got a couple years to go.
she does.
He's my daughter's third parent.
B
Built-in
Yeah.
babysitter.
He does. He picks her up from school like once a month.
B Bowie.
Not bottled in bond.
She's five.
Built-in babysitter.
She's 5, but she's like 25. Like it's I don't know that she cares for me a whole lot. Yeah.
You get on her nerves.
Yeah. Why is Denny Potter here?
Denny Potter's here.
Because we're doing a
again.
podcast. B. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, listeners, you know where you can find us at. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And you can find us almost anywhere. But our main place is on Facebook. We have a private Facebook group called the Bourbon Roadies. Whiskey drinkers in there that just love to share their whiskey, share their stories. You know our 3 rules. You got to be 21. You got to love bourbon. Hell, who don't like bourbon, right? And you got to agree to play nice. Whether you're drinking from the bottom of the shelf like I started out with that old 10 high, or you're drinking the top of the shelf like Jim likes to drink from like the Pappy's bottle, or this beautiful Feo 2 from Maker's Mark. We want you to be able to enjoy that whiskey with your friends, with our family. So no haters in there. If you are, we got 3 badass moderators, Drew, Jason, and Adam, that will cut you off knees and kick you out. You can go find another group. That's just how we are. No rudeness. So we do 2 shows a week. We do our weekly craft distillery show where we'll review a whiskey. We'll break it down for you, tell you whether we like it or not. Usually if you see it on our show, we love it. You check that one out. It's about 15 or 20 minutes. And then we have an hour-long show, like today's show with Jane and Denny. Hey, this is going to be a little bit longer one. But hey, it'll get you to work and back and get you on that lawnmower for a little bit anyways. But you want to check that out. So you know what we always say, the way to check that out is you need to go to the top of that app, hit that plus sign, that check sign, that subscribe sign. That way that app will tell you, hey, these 2 jokers got a show that just released. And then we need you to scroll on down on that app, hit that 5-star review. Leave us some comments, because you know what I'm about to say. The big bad booty daddy of bourbon will come to your house carrying this Feo 2 in his hand. You'll drink all night long, just laughing away. By the end of the night, you'll leave us that 5-star review and some comments, I guarantee. No, seriously, those comments, that 5-star review opens up doors to distilleries like Maker's Mark to us, gets great guests on our show with great conversations like Jane and Denny, gets great whiskey in our hands for reviews like this 2021 limited release Feo 2 that we named our 2021 Bourbon of the Year. No doubt we loved it. We're very approachable. You can go on our website and leave us comments. We'd appreciate if you read our blogs on there, our reviews. You can shop for our swag. We'd appreciate if you purchase that, our Bourbon Bullshitter t-shirt, our Bourbon Road shirt, some of our whiskey glasses, any other swag that we have on there. That helps this veteran-owned and operated podcast get on down the Bourbon Road. We are, as far as I know, one of the only podcasts that get on the road and visit distilleries that bring you these great stories in person. That way we can look somebody straight in the eye and get a good story out of them. That's the way we like to do it. You can always email us. He's Jim@thebourbonroad.com. I'm Mike@thebourbonroad.com. But you can always reach out to us on our Instagram. That's probably the best way. Just send us a DM. He's JSanta63. I'm Big Bourbon Chief. And you know what we always like to say. We'll see you on down the Bourbon Road.